Radio. How we doing out there, football fans? My name is Tyler Bieber, the host of Rouge Radio. Thank you for joining us tonight, and as well, as always, on the podcast, rougeradio.com. Check it out there. You can check us out on iTunes as well, YouTube, really anything. There's no reason you should be missing Rouge Radio. So thanks again for tuning in and checking us out. So, talked about it last week, and came to fruition finally. Calvillo, he has from the Canadian Football League. Announcement came earlier this week, and pretty much what you would expect. I mean, a guy who has played so many years in the Canadian League, like Anthony Calvillo has, 20 years in fact. 16, remarkable. A lot of guys don't even play 16 years, let alone 16 with one team, and then an additional few with other teams as well, which Anthony Calvillo did, starting out his career in 1994 with the Las Vegas Posse, rolling on there to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, where he spent 3 years, 1995, 96, and 97 with the Tiger Cats, and then moved to Montreal, joined the Alouettes, watched behind another great Canadian Football League quarterback in Tracy Ham for a few years, and then got in the saddle, got the Grey Cup appearances, the Grey Cup rings. Truly a remarkable career, and one that you look at the success that quarterbacks have had, and Calvillo made the mark that you can get recognition playing in Canada. You know, he's got the match from Chris Smith's head coach, Mark Trestman, more recently is now the head coach with the Chicago Bears in the National Football League and whatnot. Anthony Calvillo made marks in the United States. Just a tremendous career, and you think greatness when it comes to Anthony Calvillo, and he's going to be truly missed, even though he missed a large part of last season, and you started to see the transition a little bit. Next year, when you don't see number 13 on the sidelines or even his face on the sidelines for the Montreal Alouettes, it's truly going to hit home that he is officially gone. We'll get more into that in a little bit here, but we're going to introduce a new member of the Rouge Radio team. He is Andrew, and he's joining us, co-hosting with me tonight. Andrew, how are you doing?
Not too bad, Tyler. How are you?
Doing well. Why don't you just start out by introducing yourself to our listeners out there and explaining, you know, your passion for football, where it started, and where you'd like to see your future go.
Well, I started watching the CFL when I was about 8 or 9. I live in British Columbia, so naturally I'm a huge Lions fan, but I have great appreciation for all of the CFL. And I'm 19 years old. I'm a journalism student at a university in Surrey, and I hope to be a sports journalist one day. And yeah, the CFL is one of my favorite sports leagues. I love watching every season, and yeah, I can't wait to see what this season holds.
You can follow Andrew on Twitter at Canucks_Lions, just as it would be spelt. Andrew, one of the things with Anthony Calvillo and his career, it seemed, was first a ton of success against virtually anybody that he played against. But when it came to the BC Lions, he seemed to struggle. He threw the second most career against the BC Lions. Now, there was a couple teams he threw more against, perhaps just because he played them more often. But the record is what I was looking at primarily, and that was 12-19, and it was even lesser with the Montreal Alouettes because, of course, he did have the 4 years prior to that with Hamilton and Las Vegas. But a record of 12-19, which is a winning percentage of 38%. Any insight being out in that area, anything that you saw with the BC Lions that they may have done to struggle make Anthony Calvillo struggle and make him think a little bit more when he was taking on the lines?
Well, I've always noticed his struggle at BC Place especially. I think he's only won there one time in the last 12, 13 years, something like that. And I think a lot of that has to go out to the BC defense, which has been dominant for the better part of a decade. I mean, BC has some of the best corners in the league. Their pass rush was phenomenal in the last 4 or 5 years, and I think that played a lot into it. But there just seemed to be something about Calvillo when he played against BC. He just wasn't himself for whatever reason. I don't know.
Of course, there was the Grey Cup loss. Another team that he had similar record. In fact, the only two teams that had a losing record against were the BC Lions and the Calgary Stampeders. Calgary's his winning percentage against the Stampeders was a little bit better. He had 14 wins in 30 games, but lost Grey Cup games to both teams. The wins for Anthony Calvillo and the Alouettes came over the Edmonton Eskimos and twice against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. A lot of documented success against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Hamilton Tiger Cats, the division rivals that you see more than twice every season. I guess when you look at Anthony Calvillo, it was interesting earlier in his career because they seemed to get to the Grey Cup every year. They were a top team in the year, and for the longest until 2009, Anthony Calvillo only had one Grey Cup ring. And it was interesting to note because it was kind of like the Ricky Ray treatment. Ricky Ray, he won a Grey Cup before he went to the National Football League. Won a Grey Cup in 2005 when he came back, but a large part of that was due to Jason Moss's playoff performances and holding their winning games, finishing them very well. What was your take, Andrew, in terms of Anthony Calvillo? Have you ever had any doubts, when the Alouettes lost a game on home field in the playoffs or anything like that, maybe he might not be the quarterback that he used to be, or were you in the realm of thinking that he's Anthony Calvillo, he's going to make a play, you just got to, be patient, it happens to some of the greats? What was your thoughts on that?
Well, I thought towards the end of 2012 for sure, I thought he might decide to call it a career, but he did come back this year, and you can certainly see it this season before he went down with a concussion. That's like his play. I don't know if you can really attribute it to him or to the poor offensive coaching of Dan Hawkins, but something just hasn't clicked the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, and I'm not really sure if that's all due with him or not, or dealing with injuries on the offensive line and the receiving core as well.
It was interesting to note with Dan Hawkins. He got the early fire in Alouettes. Jim Popp let him go. He stepped down onto the sidelines to take over, and now it's kind of looking like Jim Popp is going to maintain the sidelines in Montreal, and he's going to remain the head coach at least for the next year. A couple players in him as well, and my long-time thought was that Jim Popp was just a temporary solution like he was before when he took over, but it's looking like he may be the head coach, and it's interesting to me. I don't know what your thoughts are, Andrew. You can share them in a second here, but it's a little bit weird to see a general manager on the sideline as a head coach, but I mean, Jim Popp has had the success of being a head coach. He's gotten the team to a Grey Cup. He had I don't want to say a great year this year because of the situation that was in Montreal, but he did a fine job of turning that team around and getting them a playoff spot when it looked like, as bad as Winnipeg was in it for the longest time. Andrew, what are your thoughts on Jim Popp forward as the head coach of the Montreal Alouettes?
Well, I think he definitely turned them around late in the season. I mean, early in the season, if you had told me that they would be even in the playoffs, I would have told you were crazy, just how badly they were playing to start the season. And something about Jim Popp, maybe it's just the continuity, maybe because the players know him. A lot of them have played for him for years. And you look at other teams like the BC Lions with Wally Buono, John Huffnagel with the Calgary Stampeders. A lot of teams have gone with that, have their GM be their head coach as well, and they've gone on with much success. So I think they will try to keep going with Jim Popp and see how things go this season, especially with a young quarterback who is inexperienced in the CFL. Yeah.
You do raise the point there. You have John Huffnagel in Calgary, Austin with the Hamilton Cats. It used to be Wally Wano out there in BC. But it's still weird to me because Jim Popp just doesn't strike me as a head coach type. But I mean, he's had the success as we mentioned, and players seem to respect him. So if it works for them, then I mean, all the more power to him. And speaking about Anthony Calvillo, Jim Popp said, "Today, a hero to many, not to be forgotten, but to be cherished and respected for years to come. Anthony, you have earned your stripes." And that was Jim Popp speaking about Anthony Calvillo at the retirement press conference earlier in this weekend. On CFL.ca, there's a great number of videos. They have articles there commemorating the career of Anthony Calvillo. I'm going to either coaches or former players, teammates, or current players commenting on Anthony Calvillo. You can go there on CFL.ca to find this, but just a couple that I'm going to read off here. The first one is by Henry Burris of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, impending free agent Henry Burris. Many great battles. Whenever you saw it was going to be Henry Burris against Anthony Calvillo, you knew that the points were going to come out hard and heavy, and you knew the yards were going to be outstanding and gaudy numbers on both sides. But speaking towards an Anthony Calvillo, Henry Burris says, AC will go down as one of the greatest CFL quarterbacks ever. To overcame setbacks in so many areas shows his true leadership and abilities to win no matter what. It's been a privilege to play against one of the all-time greats. I know he will take all he's accomplished on the field and have the same success off the field. Thanks, AC, for all the highlights that you provided me and football fans all over the country. Another quarterback that Anthony Calvillo had a bunch of showdowns with, including back-to-back Grey Cups, and then a third one in 2005 Ricky Ray, the 2002, 2003, and then 2005 as well. What I admired most about AC as a player was his consistency. Every year it seemed like he had his team finishing in first place and he was taking them to the Grey Cup. Then you throw in that was also being division most outstanding. Most players would love to have a couple of great years like that throughout their career, and AC was doing it every year. Another one here, Adrian McPherson, a former backup to Anthony Calvillo and current Calgary Stampeder quarterback. We all know that he's a great player, but he's an even better person. He's such a humble person. In my opinion, he's one of the best players who's ever played in the league because of how hard he works and how well prepared he is. That's what I learned from him, the importance of preparation and becoming a student of the game. And off of that note from Adrian McPherson, Andrew, it always seemed like Anthony Calvillo was, as Adrian McPherson said, prepared. And it didn't really matter what you kind of threw at him. You know, you could send the house on a blitz. You could send three guys, drop everybody else back. But Anthony Calvillo, time and time again, knew what to do when it came to playing the quarterback position. And incredible, because preparation. And even we mentioned the BC Lions, how he didn't play exactly well, but every time you see that you're going to be playing the Montreal Alouettes and Anthony Calvillo, you had to think, okay, it's Anthony Calvillo. We're going to be in for a long haul here. I guess just what did you see from Anthony Calvillo? And if you can compare it, I mean, we have, not to talk about the NFL a whole lot here, but I guess you would kind of compare it to what Peyton Manning has been able to do with the Denver Broncos, not?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at a guy like Calvillo, and he's one of those rare quarterbacks that actually calls every play. You think, like, the quarterback position is hard enough, but you got to throw play calling in there, too. It just shows how much knowledge Calvillo had and still has of the game, and how well he knew how to dissect the defense. Like, he can, just like Peyton Manning, he can see what the defense is saying you, and he can make changes on the fly. just like that. He can get the ball out quickly. He can take off with the ball with his feet if he has to. He's not exactly the fastest quarterback in the world, but he certainly could if he had to.
And former head coach Mark Trestman, who is now with the Chicago Bears, said, "We all grew because Anthony Calvillo showed us how to carry ourselves on a daily basis through the journey, the long marathon that is a football season. He showed us how to be accountable, responsible, all different life skill things we tried to teach our guys. Every single day, Anthony Calvillo took the lead." And then finally wrapping it up here, Jim Popp, of course the current general manager and head coach of the Montreal Alouettes, to many steps not to be forgotten, but to be cherished and respected for years to come. Anthony, you have earned your stripes. I, first and foremost, want to thank you for being a true gentleman and professional. Secondly, for inspiring us all with your courage and determination. And thirdly, for being such a great leader on and off the field. And there's been some discussion with what Anthony Calvillo has done in the Canadian Football League about whether he should have a chance to make it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and that is in Canton, Ohio, of course. Widely regarded as a Hall of Fame for the National Football League, but the catch has always been it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame, not the NFL Hall of Fame, the Pro Hall of Fame. Kind of like how up in Canada here, it's the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, not the CFL Hall of Fame, because you have folks who contributed in the CIS in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame as well. Andrew, do you think that Anthony Calvillo should have a shot to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, he has the most passing yards, not only in the CFL, but in pro football. And that should definitely mean something to him, and Damon Allen as well, and then the other quarterbacks. I mean, yes, you can say the CFL is far different from the NFL. We have a wider field. There's more room to work with. You know, all of these things. But at the end of the day, it's pro football, not just the NFL. And Calvillo should certainly have a shot at it.
Records for Anthony Calvillo. Just amazing. Most passing yards, 79,816. Most pass attempts, 9,437. Most completions, 5,892. Most touchdown passes, 455. Most 300-yard passing games, 125. Most quarterbacks start one at 167. 4,000-plus yard passing seasons with 11. Most completions at 44. And then there's Grey Cup records. Most passing yards there, 2,470. Most pass attempts at 298. Most completions, 79. Most touchdown passes, 9. Most 300-yard passing games, 5. Most quarterback starts in the Grey Cup at 8. And we mentioned it before, for the longest time, the Montreal Alouettes dominated the East Division. But with the retirement of Anthony Calvillo, Andrew, do you think that we're finally going to see, I mean, we saw it this past year with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, last year with the Toronto Argonauts. Is the time over for the Montreal Alouettes, and are we going to start seeing a little bit of a transition, maybe a little bit of a rotation every year with a different East Division champion?
Well, I absolutely agree. I think Montreal, they've obviously taken big steps this year with Troy Smith, with Tanner Marsh, with even Josh Nieslander. But they're still young quarterbacks. They're new to the CFL. They're going to have some tough times just as any other quarterback does. And as a team, they will likely struggle, at least to start the season, without Calvillo at the helm at all. But we saw lots of strides with Hamilton after some pretty subpar seasons before that, making it to the Grey Cup. Even though they did get beaten badly by Saskatchewan, they've still shown great strides. And if they can get just a little more consistency, they can really take the next step next year, I believe. And same with the Toronto Argonauts as well. They won the Grey Cup in 2012, and I think they can continue that trend.
So when you play 20 years in the Canadian Football League, you're going to have lots of memories and a lot of things that people remember you by. Is there anything that stands out for you maybe early in his career or as of recently that's going to stick out in your mind and something that you're going to remember Anthony Calvillo by specifically?
Well, I think watching that moment when he took the passing yards lead, that's the one that's going to stick out for me, I think. Just like similar to what we saw when G. Simon took over the league receiving record, just seeing the game completely stop for just 5 or 10 minutes just to recognize that moment. Have Jamin Allen there to congratulate him, have his whole family there, the commissioner, and the whole league there just for Calvillo. I think that was probably one of the more special moments you can think of for him.
One of the defining moments for me in Anthony Calvillo's career was in the 2009 Grey Cup game. And we know the whole story behind that game with the Saskatchewan Roughriders taking a too many men on the field penalty. But it was Anthony Calvillo's play in that fourth quarter when it seemed like the Riders were going to just walk away with the game. You know, they had it in hand. They were up with a comfortable lead. But Anthony Calvillo marched the Alouettes down the field twice, flawlessly, getting touchdowns, and the Alouettes put themselves in a position to win the game as they did on Damon Duvall's second field goal attempt. And that's, I think, when you knew for sure. I mean, he had all the stats, he was on his way to all these records and everything like that, the MVP awards and whatnot, but that moment for me was when you looked at Anthony Calvillo's career and said, yes, that's the quarterback that Anthony Calvillo is. And then, of course, they repeated in 2010 as the Grey Cup champions as well. And getting back to the savvy veteran poise of Anthony Calvillo on the field, one of the things that I always enjoyed seeing Anthony Calvillo do, maybe because he didn't do it as much late in his career, but that was pull the football down and take off with it. And there was the times where this 39-year-old quarterback who has clearly lost a step, no slight to him, in the running game, but he's running for 22 yards down the middle of the field, and it's like, guys, he's 39 years old. How can you not catch him? And it was always so comical to me to see Anthony Calvillo do that type of thing. What are your thoughts on his rushing ability as, you know, his a little bit, and he wasn't as fleet of foot as he used to be?
Well, I think it just shows his true competitive nature. I mean, he knows better than anyone that he's not the fastest guy on the field, and he knows that he's not going to rip one off for a touchdown or anything, but the fact that he's willing to put himself at risk to just get that first down if he needs to, like, that just shows tremendous character. And any quarterback that can do that, whether they're fast or not, has my full respect, and especially someone that age doing it like that. That's incredible.
And he always seemed to pick his times when to do it, and he did it perfectly. I mean, again, it just goes back to what Anthony Calvillo did best. The defense is reading the field and knowing what to do at the exact time, and maybe not always trusting that arm of his, and instead using his legs to pick up a first down when need be. So you talked a little bit about Smith and his ability this year. I've talked plenty about my thoughts towards Troy Smith and what he needs to do to improve upon the position of being the Montreal Alouettes starting quarterback now that Anthony Calvillo's gone. But we'll get a fresh take here. What are your thoughts on Troy Smith as a quarterback right now, and where can he improve his game to get to a point where the Montreal Alouettes have the utmost confidence and utmost trust in him being their starting quarterback?
Well, it was great the way he picked up the game right away. I was surprised. I didn't think he would see the field at all this season. And the fact that they just kept bringing him in on short yardage and worked him into the lineup, it really gave him confidence in the game and knowing the rules of the game and how he could improve his own skills. What I noticed early on was he's got a cannon for an arm. I mean, he can throw it a mile, but he lacked some control to start the season, and it continued as the season went along. So if he can sort of control that a bit and really lock in on his targets, I think he can really take the next step as a quarterback in this league.
Now, do you think it's going to be Troy Smith for sure as a starting quarterback, or do you like Tanner Marsh a little bit? Marsh had, I still don't know what kind of game you call it, because he had several turnovers in it, but had the late Hail Mary to Eric Deslauriers to set up a winning field goal against the BC Lions. Is that the type of...
That game was torture at the Lions fans. Oh, man.
It was so remarkable. Is that the type of game that you look at a guy like Tanner Marsh and you think, okay, he has the quality to be a winner? Or is that the type of game that you look at and you say, okay, he won the game, but we really shouldn't have been in a position to win that game with all the turnovers he had? What are your thoughts on Tanner Marsh?
Well, I think he played tremendously well. I mean, to even give yourself a shot when you've made all those mistakes and to put your team in a position to win at that stage of the game is incredible for a young quarterback. And especially that deep throw to Arlan Bruce that he had, I think it was about 70 or 80 yards. And that's where I kind of could tell that he was really locked in. And he could easily compete for the starting job with Troy Smith. I think Smith has the edge right now because he finished the season. But I think Tanner will definitely give himself a shot.
Adrian McPherson, he was heading into the 2013 season, ultimately went to the Arena Football League. He's back now as the third, I guess, well, you don't really want to call it the third string yet because I'm not exactly convinced on both Levi Mitchell and Drew Tate just yet, but Adrian McPherson was a guy who learned in this Montreal Alouettes system for so long, and many thought he was going to be the next guy up to replace Anthony Calvillo. Obviously, he's not going to be anymore. But if you're starting a new, well, I guess you're not starting a new offense to be exact, but is that the type of quarterback, an Adrian McPherson or a Troy Smith, that you look at and you say that's the guy that you want to use if you're the Montreal Alouettes? Names aside, just throw the names out the window. Is that the type of quarterback you want? The guy who can move the football with his legs, get first downs, pick up maybe 400 to 500 yards rushing, or do you prefer the drop-back pocket passer guy who can read the field like what Anthony Calvillo brought up so many years?
I think absolutely having that guy that can really stretch the field with his legs. I mean, that is the type of quarterback you want in this league right now, I believe. I mean, Ricky Ray is obviously a legendary quarterback, and he's got better accuracy and will be one of the best drop-back passes in league history. But right now, with the way the CFL is going and the way the NFL is going now, I mean, good quarterbacks that can run with their legs and be good quarterbacks as well, those are a hot commodity. And the ability to, run those play-action plays and fool the defense into thinking you're running and then just take off with it yourself. I mean, that is a deadly weapon in the CFL right now.
Okay, Andrew, we're right up against it here, so we're going to wrap it up here. That's going to do it for us tonight here on Rouge Radio. My name is Tyler Bieber, joined by Andrew Deutschmann. RougeRadio.com. Check out the podcast later on. Andrew, great first show. Great to have you on as the Rouge Radio team here. Thanks for joining us tonight here on Rouge Radio. You have yourselves a fantastic evening out there. And we'll talk to you next week here on Rouge Radio.